you have to also understand that Davos has executed a coup against, but all of their agendas revolve around two things. One, get rid of Trump. Two, war with Russia. And this won't be the last attempt on Trump's life either, because I think Trump's finally gotten the talk of what the plan is. Let's talk about the CrowdStrike thing. Shift gears a little bit. You'll see where I'm going to go with this in just a second. And I'm going by what I've heard. I'm not making a thesis statement here. I'm making a hypothesis because I've seen enough evidence at this point. The plan has been all year long to Kamala Harris says that she can win the election on that. No, she goes out yesterday and cuts a deal with Hillary Clinton and George Soros to throw Obama under the bus. Shit sandwiches are on the menu. That's all that's on the menu, even for the FOMC chair. Joe Biden would also be the easiest person to replace because he was already a mushroom. In the world that I live in, that answer is all the stuff with the Secret Service and, you know, whether Cheadle's falling on her sword it doesn't matter. Well, one, it's all chum. Two, it's all subject to malice and disinformation being seeded into the zeitgeist in order to send you down rabbit holes that do not matter and to distract you from the overarching question, which is,
so today I'm back with my favorite returning guest here on the channel, Tom Luongo. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Luke. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing better than my American friends. And I think that's where we're going to have to start today's interview. Everybody wants to talk about Trump and everything surrounding that assassination attempt. Tom, what's your 50,000 foot read of that whole situation?
It's pretty easy. The what we like to call the American deep state, tried to take out. I think it's a Venn diagram of a lot of different factions, not the least of which I like to break the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, down by a number of different names and whatnot. Davos, the UK, the intelligence blob, Congress, the DNC. They're all there's various factions, but every one of them have different agendas, but all of their agendas revolve around two things. One, get rid of Trump. Two, war with Russia. And, so they're always going to look like that they're united and it's all one big club and we ain't in it. So the good news is the shooter missed. Either for whatever reason, the shooter missed, like windage, Trump turned his head, hand of God, you name it. I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is that he survived. And because he survived, we're now on as I was saying to Marty Bent the other day, we're kind of on a different timeline, right? And I've studied enough quantum mechanics to know that there's a whole lot of eigenstates out there, that 9,999 of them out of 10,000. Trump's brains are blasted all over the audience on national television. This one time didn't happen, and that's left us in a situation that is both better and worse than where we were previous to a week ago Saturday. And I think that's probably the best way of really looking at it, but let's not be mistaken or confused about what actually happened. It doesn't matter whether there was one shooter, two shooters, this, that, anything else. It doesn't matter what all the stuff with the Secret Service and whether Cheadle's falling on her sword it doesn't matter. All that stuff is easy to. Well, one, it's all chum. Two, it's all subject to malice and disinformation being seeded into the zeitgeist in order to send you down rabbit holes that do not matter and to distract you from the overarching question, which is, why was President Trump nearly shot in the head? And why are we even remotely considering this to be okay? In effect, because there's a large contingent of people who want to believe that this was the right course of action. Thankfully, there's a lot of people who woke up, that evening and went, "What? No. I know we have our differences across left and right and whatever, but this is not the way you solve political problems." Well, it is. If you've been paying any kind of attention, that we're now in a cleanup mode of anybody who thinks that they're going to try and derail Project Globalism, whatever version of Project Globalism you think is the version that's on the agenda. And I can tell you that there are at least 2 or 3 different versions of it out there, and this is what always confuses people. So, but there were attempts on Viktor Orban that were not highly publicized. We had the very We had the attempt on Robert Fico over in Slovakia, which if he wasn't such a contrary son of a bitch, as my mother-in-law would put it, he'd be dead. They got Shinzo Abe in Japan earlier in the year, right? Or sometime last year. It's been a while now since Abe's, but they all have the same thing associated with them, which is that, the normal security protocols were not followed. They were pushed into a position where the perfect set of events were, created in order for a quote unquote lone gunman to get an opportunity to take out a world leader. And I know there's been multiple attempts on Putin's life and blah, 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 blah. So, and this won't be the last attempt on Trump's life either, because, at this point, when you understand the dynamic, the way I do, or the way, where more and more people are beginning to see it, and then it makes sense strategically that they will not stop and they do not care. They have fallback plans in their flow chart for Trump surviving, but they were pretty low orders of probability. So everybody was walking around just getting ready for preparing their, oh my God, it's such a tragedy that President Trump was shot in the practice in the mirror and the whole 9 yards, and that Republican National Convention was clearly designed to be, well, Trump wasn't going to be there. Nikki Haley was going to be the president. It was going to be the nominee. And now we're watching the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party as everybody runs around with like a chicken with their head cut off, trying to figure out what to do in the power back. Like they've been setting up a return of Hillary Clinton all year, and they've been, there are signs there. If it's like your confirmation bias. If you see certain things happen, you're like, yep, there's your sign. Yep, here comes Hillary, here comes Hillary, here comes Hillary. But there's all those other signs over here that maybe not. But a lot of this is just typical party infighting. Obama and Clinton have been fighting for the soul of the Democratic Party since the day she stepped down and let him be the nominee in 2008. So you tell me, at this point, this fight's 16 years old, and this woman wants to be president, and a lot of very powerful people trust her to move the project forward. And and then we can get into the whys. I think that the split between Obama and Clinton are important. We can get into that in a minute or so, but I'll turn the mic back over.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different rabbit holes to explore. Just quickly on that note about Clinton, you brought her up, but I was listening to your interview with Marty that dropped 7 hours ago, and I've got about halfway through it so far. And you mentioned something very interesting. Hillary Clinton hasn't tweeted since July 12th. That's 10 days ago. I mean, it's interesting timing.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's a big tell. And I noticed it the day after the event. I'm like, everybody has weighed in. Bill weighed in and said, well, Hillary and I decry that. Yeah, bullshit, Bill. Like, aside from the fact that Bill doesn't actually control his Twitter account, let's not kid ourselves. But Hillary was probably in the same kind of mourning that she was in, and probably on a 3-day bender, the same way she was after she lost to him in 2016. But now she's been scheming the entire year. I go back, there's so many little details. But just so everybody understands what I mean by this, I firmly believe there are two different factions. There's a Davos faction, an old Europe faction, centered around the European Union, the European Central Bank, the old colonial empires of continental Europe. And then I do believe that there's a distinctly old British element to this as well, and it's old British oligarchy. And I don't think that those two things are the same. I think that they're different. I think they have different agendas. I think they have different agendas relative to Israel at a minimum. And you have to also understand that Davos has executed a coup against Britain in the last 5 years or last 3 years. First with the coup against the Liz Truss and Queen Elizabeth a couple of years ago, installing Rishi Sunak. This is to destroy Brexit and to get and to eventually create the coronation of Keir Starmer, and to have the civil service in the UK, along with Labour, basically overturn Brexit and move the UK fully back within the continental or European Union orbit. This has been a 30-year project going back to the fall of Margaret Thatcher, right? So, like, and so they have they both want to control the quote unquote, the post-America West, right? They both want to see the United States effectively destroyed or at least brought low. The British have a different MO than Europe does. To understand Britain, you have to understand the concept of balance of power. Britain is always the guy at the table, being the person to get two sides to fight each other to the point where they're both weakened. And they will back, hell, they'll even back both sides in different ways, and then remove their support at a particular moment to allow the most amount of carnage afterwards. The history on this is very, very clear, okay? Or at least it's a version, it's a way of, it's a lens through which to look at the history we think we know and then see that hand. And they're very good at hiding it, but it's always there. And I think that that's what's been, I've been, for years I've been saying, like, they want to destroy the United States and, and transfer all the wealth of the United States back to continental Europe, and then from there transfer all the power to the international organizations centered around the UN, the EU, the IMF, and all the rest of it. And I firmly still believe that that's part of the plan. I think that that's Davos's plan. But Britain doesn't win in that situation. The British remnant doesn't win in that situation. So when that's happening, they're cozying back up to the Americans, and they're trying to influence American politics. So you have a distinctly Davosian or European policy, and that comes out of Obama. That's all the Affordable Care Act and all this CAFE and all this climate change crap and all that DEI and ESG and all that. That's all straight out of Davos, right? And then you have the British who are like, kill the Russians, defend Israel, control the trade routes of the Middle East, yada, yada, yada. Get control of the Black Sea, right? And so those two things are constantly warring within American foreign policy and American fiscal policy, American domestic policy. And you can see it playing itself out. And Clinton clearly is in the orbit of the quote unquote British remnant, for lack of a better term. And so you have that, you have her, you have Lindsey Graham's, you have, the classic neocons, John McCain and Lindsey Graham and all those guys. And, the Dick Cheneys, the Bush family, blah, 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 blah. And then you have the Obama wing, which is different. And now that we are post the Trump assassination attempt, when I looked at the situation, I said, well, let's go back to when Obama was attacked and his chef wound up dead, right? And then, floating in the bay, right? Who do you think that was? Okay. Obama has been on his back foot for a while now. Joe Biden, his protege, his proxy, has been, protected up to a point. But Joe Biden would also be the easiest person to replace because he was already a mushroom. So the plan has been all year long to replace Joe Biden with someone else. And who would that someone else be? Well, we've all said, well, it'd be Kamala Harris because she's got all the cards. That's what I've been saying. For the most part, tactically and strategically, I'm like, Kamala Harris has all the cards to play. They'll replace her with like Gavin Newsom or this one or that one. I'm like, yeah, no. You've got all this procedural stuff that gets in the way of that. But in the background, I'm like, don't discount the idea of Hillary Clinton, because if you get rid of Trump and you get rid of Biden, you set the stage for two sides of the uniparty rolling out the exact same candidate. Nikki Haley, Hillary Clinton. They're both ruthless. One is one is higher up the food chain than the other one, but they're both indistinguishable in terms of their political pedigree for all intents and purposes. So, and there's a lot of stuff about South Carolina politics. I don't want to even go into to make that point about Haley, but to me, this is what it looked like they were setting up. I said this back in February in an issue of our newsletter. Dexter looked at me and was like, "Are you sure you want to make this call?" I'm like, "Yes, I do. I mean, I can make it as a conjecture. Wouldn't this be the most demoralizing thing imaginable?" So that means there's a high probability of that's what they're probably going to do because they hate us. They think nothing, they don't think anything of us. We are just tax cows to them. We are just, the awful hoi polloi who all need to be just, vaccinated and destroyed and everything else anyway. So why not, rub our nose in it? I mean, they just tried to assassinate Trump and they really actually don't even care that we know that they know that we know. Right. And they've been acting this way for way too long. And in the weeks leading up to or since the debate, I've been saying, there's these people are way too calm. They're like losing on every front here, and they're acting way too calm. Like they have this whole thing like ring fence. They know exactly what It's like they're still. I keep saying they keep operating like they're running the Microsoft project file on the back of on the whiteboard over Global Central, like they're projecting up on the whiteboard. There's every day going about their task list, doing their thing as they architect the Great Reset, and I'm like, or whatever it is, and I'm like, did you not notice Chevron? Did you not notice Jarvis? Did you not notice that everybody can see that Joe Biden is a mushroom? Blah, 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 blah. Like, all of your plans have fallen apart. I mean, all your plans are falling apart. And yet still everybody was like, yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, well, clearly we know why now. Because they were planning on killing Trump. And they were planning on killing Trump before the nominating convention in order to, create havoc, civil war, install two unwanted people that nobody's going to vote for. They can then rig the election however they wanted to. Dogs and cats living together. Red states secede. Bond markets collapse. Capital stays in Europe. The United States is destroyed. And Davos and the Brits both get to turn around and go, see, government I formed by foreign of the people doesn't work. You need a strong central government to rule, which is a very important ideological point that we need to be demoralized, that there is only one way forward, which is that strong oligarchs who have the divine right to rule continue to do so. And I really do believe that is part of their animating spirit. And then along with the fear of actually losing the power. So you have to do all of those things at the same time. And, I've said, and every time I say this, I get people, they're both horrified at first, and then they're like, yeah, he's right about that. Which is that there's nothing more arrogant than an old European oligarch, be it British or French or Italian or, German or whatever. Like there's nothing worse than there's nothing more arrogant than that. So why would you ever believe that these people would ever give up power willingly? And so to me, it just felt like the worst kept secret in all of Washington and Brussels that Trump was just going to get shot, either because they just knew that somebody was going to take care of it, or they like people talk and people act in a certain way, and people are good at reading each other's body language and their clues and everything else. And so, when you see Victoria Nuland, give an interview a few hours before Trump is actually the attempt is made on Trump, and she's smirking her way through, an interview going, I don't think Trump's going to be president, so it's not really that big. I'm like, Jesus Christ, could you not hide the light a little bit better? But she can. It's an involuntary reflex. So she knew,
Literally hours before it happened too.
I don't know. Like, yeah, literally hours before it happened, she's out there smirking her way through it. And like, oh yeah, we've got this taken care of. So, I mean, and then, everything was going to be, they were going to be able to run the table and collapse the capital markets to their need, and collapse the political systems to their need, and blah 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 blah. They still controlled enough capital. It's why they weren't worried about, I mean, this is why you saw things like a prominent city analyst over Citigroup say, yeah, well, Powell's going to need to cut by 200 basis points in September. Like, where the fuck did that come from? Nobody's got 200 basis points on their radar. No, that was a huge dog whistle to everybody. Oh, by the way, we're going to kill Trump, and we're going to crash the capital markets, and Powell's going to have to cut by 200 basis points. So and no one's going to listen to me because it's so sick. The guy, they put stuff out there like that for people to chum the waters, and for people to like, that's not going to happen. That's a 12 sigma event. That's not blah blah blah. And and everybody's normalcy bias takes over, and then they kill Trump, and then you're saying, well, yeah, Powell's going to have to cut by at least 200 basis points, right? So, I like, yeah, again, you have to wonder, like, who knew what, when, how, where, and, and all the rest of it. But you tell me, that's the story I construct in my head. That's the model I have. I'm not saying the model's the world, but that's the model I got. And, and I'm not gonna be dissuaded off of that. Because I don't need to be, because it needs to be proven otherwise that it wasn't. Like, and by the just listening to, I had the unfortunate experience of sitting out this afternoon and listening to part of, the Secret Service Director Cheadle's Stonewall in Congress, and that complete fucking clown show. And I'm like, this she is like, come on. Like, you came to a meeting with Congress and subpoenaed by Congress, and you didn't come prepared with any information whatsoever. Really? You came with no answers? Okay. You're going to jail for perjury. You're going to jail for treason, and you know it. And you can resign tomorrow all you want, but then you're a private citizen, and then we really get to go after you. Like, you're not just going to get to fall on your sword, get your gold watch, and be shunted off to some private island, to be taken care of by whomever central, the British government until you're just going to be thrown away. Like, this is the worst part about most of these quislings and these underlings. They don't even get it. Like, half of them are like, don't realize that they're the first ones that are going to be thrown up against the wall and shot. Like, Cheadle's best play was to come out in front of Congress and go, "Yep, it's all true. Everything you're telling me, yep, that's exactly right." Oh, and then watch everybody like behind the scenes, and that, like, Hillary Clinton's having a heart attack behind the scenes, and Obama is freaking out, and everybody's freaking out. Like, you don't show loyalty to these people. These people aren't going to show you a minute of loyalty, because they're going to throw you under the bus tomorrow. So what are you doing? Like, rat, leave sinking ship, come to the other side, turn state's evidence, and we'll call you a hero. This isn't hard, hon. But oh well. But at the same token, and that's basically the argument I've been making for Kamala Harris for the last 9 months, going, dude, just come out and say, I was the only member of the cabinet who wanted to replace Joe Biden because he couldn't make it through a cabinet meeting without falling asleep, but the cabinet wouldn't go along with it because they all wanted war with Ukraine. That's all she has to say. Kamala Harris says that she can win the election on that. No, she goes out yesterday and cuts a deal with Hillary Clinton and George Soros to throw Obama under the bus. Her better play was got to deal with the GOP, 25th Amendment out, Biden, become the first woman president, and then step down 7 months later. And let Trump fix the country. And then she gets to like walk off the stage as a freaking hero. But hey man, like I watch a lot of people make a lot of bad moves at the gaming table every week, and I'm like, okay, have fun with that. You're not gonna that is not a winning strategy, and it's not what Harris has done. It's clear that she made a deal with Clinton and Soros, because Soros absolutely maps to the British, doesn't map to Davos. He's already thrown Davos under the bus. He's the one who put the ideas of what the British have done previously into Davos's head to say, hey, we need to, consolidate all the debt, default on it, and then issue a new currency, just like the British did 3 times. I'm like, that's the tell, right? And if we didn't notice last week that Alexander Soros is, 35-year-old Alexander Soros is engaged to 47-year-old Huma Abedin. Well, clearly he doesn't, George Soros doesn't want official heirs. Right? Maybe some bastards, but certainly not, she's not going to be giving them any grandchildren. Are you kidding? Like, but so, and who's Huma Abedin? Just to remind everybody, that was Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. A whole wiener laptop and stroker race, all that stuff, like, best New York Post headline ever, stroker A's. Like, the Anthony Weiner caught in his underwear with the pictures, taking the selfie in his underwear. Oh my God. So, like, but it's all part of a demoralization campaign, ultimately, Luke, and that's really what this is about. And it would be hilarious if it wasn't so unbelievably freaking tragic, because we're talking about people who have access to nuclear codes.
That's the really scary part of all of this. the
I
globalists,
don't know.
they're
I'm
not
at the point
stopping.
now where it's like the whole world is Dr. Strangelove, and I don't know whether I should laugh or cry. Right. So I'm
Mm.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's really scary, Tom. You talk about this all the time. The possibility of World War III is there, and the people with their fingers over those buttons that control the nukes, they're people like Joe Biden. They're people like, people who just should not be in power, which is really interesting. Speaking of the globalists, you mentioned those three global leaders that were assassinated or taken out earlier in the year, which I was not aware of. I was only aware of the Japanese fella. I wasn't aware of the other guys, which is really interesting. But something happened last week that I really want to get your thoughts on. Well, two things happened last week. Bukele and Milei are, are perceived as like the anti-globalist leaders around the world today. There could be some interesting backgrounds and connections with Milei, but a lot of people perceive those two as being the most anti-globalist people. Have you seen Donald Trump come out in consecutive days this week and start bashing El Salvador and Bukele and saying, look, Bukele's not that great. The only reason he cleaned up the country was he threw all the criminals onto American soil. Did have you got a read on why Donald Trump is so obsessed with Bukele? Literally 2 days in a row, naming the country in consecutive interviews, when so much more is going on in America. Now, I wanted to quickly interrupt today's interview to give a massive shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is a Bitcoin banking solution that combines traditional financial services with the power of Bitcoin. Created by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners, Rhino offers a range of different services. You can buy Bitcoin, you can sell Bitcoin, you can withdraw straight to cold storage, and you can even pay other people using the Bitcoin Lightning Network. You can also purchase gift cards with sats at the click of a button, and you can even connect a multi-signature setup to Casa, all by using the Rhino application. Additionally, you can even send cash globally to your family and friends using Rhino, and soon you'll be able to pay bills, borrow money against your Bitcoin, and even save Bitcoin for your retirement, all in the one seamless application. You guys can visit rhinobitcoin.com to download Rhino today and experience the future of Bitcoin banking.
No, I don't. I hadn't even heard that yet. So you're hitting me with that cold, to be honest with you. I've been so busy with other things, I didn't even notice that. I don't trust Milei as far as I can throw him. I've said this many times. I think he's straight out of I think he's straight out of fake libertarian central casting. Like, I'm dead serious when I say that. Now, I'm happy to be wrong about this, but in the same way that I'm happy to be wrong about Vivek Ramaswamy or anybody else, but yeah, I don't understand. I don't know what Trump's gig with him is, and unless he's getting bad advice from somebody, as always. Trump is only as good as the information he's being fed, right? And by the people around him who he says who he believes he trusts. And I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, on the one hand, Trump comes out and says he's pro Bitcoin, and Bukele, who's the pro Bitcoin, the pro Bitcoin world leader, he's throwing him under the bus. I mean, not that I think that Bitcoin is a big part of this conversation, because I don't think it is. Sorry, Bitcoiners, it just doesn't. It's just not the only thing in the world, in the universe. It just other little things in this life called procreation, and those are far more important than everybody. Just buy Bitcoin and you'll solve all your problems. Oh, okay, great. I'm dead serious. I'm like, you interact with these people on Twitter and you're just like, wow, okay. I remember when I used to be somebody like that, and I don't do that in public anymore. So yeah, don't read my 14-year-old or 18-year-old Twitter feed, right? Or whatever Twitter feed. Not that I think you could even find them at this point. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I really wish I did. And
Okay.
I'm not going to sit here and filibuster and hope that my brain comes up with something, but nothing's come. So I'm just like,
It's fresh. It'll be a watch this space topic. Something that's not so fresh, and something that you talked about a long time ago in our previous interview in, I think it was 2022. At the time, you actually said that you were making the case, rather, that Tether and Bitcoin were going to be an integral part of the US's plan to actually retain hegemony over the US dollar. And at the time, people thought you and I were both absolute nutcases at the time. All the Tether truthers were coming out and they were saying the feds are going to attack Tether. They're coming after Tether. They'll never let them survive. No way. Tom, you're crazy. But now in 2024, it looks as if the tides have significantly shifted. So I'd love your updated thoughts on the whole Tether situation.
Nothing's really changed on my end. When you get the tell, you run with it until you get another piece of information that says that negates it. And I haven't gotten another piece of information that says that negates it. Meaning, when Letitia James gave Tether a slap on the wrist in the Southern District of New York court case against it, and I watched all the other stable coins executed by the Federal Reserve over the course of one summer, which broke the Bitcoin bull market in 2021, over the course of 2021 through 2022. I'm like, well, by process of elimination, Bitcoin's still standing. And then there was some good corollary forensic evidence that there was just that Bitcoin was being used to, liquefy the repo market and to collateralize the repo market. And Tether is it's a good sink for, U.S. Treasury bonds. I mean, most of its holdings are in short-term treasuries. And so, I haven't looked at Tether's market cap in months, to be honest with you. I don't even know where it is. The last time I looked, it was $110 billion. I'm not sure what it is today. But if it's, $150 billion, well, there's $40 billion worth of net inflows into Tether, and that's into Tether, and that's liquid flows. Got to understand that those move back and forth quickly. Tether's market cap rises and falls. So it winds up being an easy source of short-term liquidity in the repo markets, which then, of course, keeps the volatility in the silver market, which is the key to the world at this point, under control. So anything, you want to create pools of liquidity within the treasury market, especially the domestic treasury market, which allow for the for the banking system to operate smoothly, the payments layer to operate smoothly, even if we're starting to see delinquencies rise. It's like commercial real estate and credit cards and this, that, and everything else. Like, there comes a point where, while all the signs are there that we should have already seen the credit contraction and blah, 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 all the things that the bears are talking about, and they're not wrong. I'm not going to argue with Danielle DiMartino Booth when she says that we're on the verge of a big, freaking credit spasm. Well, yeah, I agree with you. And that Powell's probably behind the curve and should have already cut rates. Maybe, or maybe he's, as at the same time, I think, Danielle would agree with me, because I've heard her talk about this stuff, that his work in draining the offshore dollar markets and the swamp that is the global shadow banking system isn't done yet. So it's this, it's this push and pull. It's this, it's this will you, won't you? It's this, well, on the one hand and on the other hand. And you have to ask yourself what Powell's priorities actually are. And what his priorities are about those, balancing those two things based on his actions. If he cuts in July, that things are acute. If he doesn't cut in July, which I don't think he's going to, then he's going to hold off until September. And if nothing breaks between now and the September meeting, I'm sorry. I think the market's been wrong before that Powell was going to cut, even when, Fed funds futures were saying 95% chance he's going to cut in September. And then, we get into August and he comes out and goes, nope, things look good. Inflation's still structurally high. Labor market's not terrible, not cutting rates. And then, and then all of a sudden, everybody has to start getting really worried. And then they got to start moving and hedging their bets that maybe Powell's not going to cut. And then you start to see markets react. So, they tried to blackmail him all of Q4 last year into cutting 7 times in 2024. And guess what he did? Told them to go fuck themselves. And everybody told me I was crazy. 0 cuts, right? Big old shutout on the board. It's like Dominic Hasek. It's come out of retirement to throw yet another shutout against the Red Wings. You know what I mean? It's crazy. I'm making a hockey reference now for people who don't know who I'm talking about. And if you don't know who Dominic Hasek is, well, that's to your eternal shame. The greatest freaking goaltender to ever put on pads and pick up a stick. So, you want to watch artistry in motion, folks. So yeah, like throwing up goose eggs. And I still think Powell's going to cut at least once this year, but I think he's going to wait until he wants to wait until after the election. He doesn't want to give anybody any fodder. He doesn't want to, doesn't want to let anybody off the hook. And and if like let's talk about the CrowdStrike thing real quick. Shift gears a little bit. You'll see where I'm going to go with this in just a second. And I'm going by what I've heard. I'm not making a thesis statement here. I'm making a hypothesis because I've seen enough evidence at this point about the whole, well, they seeded a null check to poke a protected address within the operating system, within Windows, that would automatically cause a blue screen of death, because that's what hooking a memory address that low would do. Then the question is, was the code lying in wait and just waiting? And I read another thing this morning saying that the code was lying in wait for the data to be written to that address, and then boom, it would cause the dump. So what happened with the hot update that created the poke, which created the data, which poked the address, which caused the blue screen of death? And if it's embedded in not just Windows, but Linux and Mac, because this is not something that's at system level like this. This is not something that's kind of operating system agnostic, right? Did somebody execute an attempted time bomb, code bomb within all the major operating systems to take down the global computing on the most valuable July options expiration day in history, a week after a failed assassination attempt from Donald Trump, when everybody was expecting the markets to be trading, everybody was probably expecting the Dow to be trading at 38,000 or 37,000 as opposed to 41,000, and they needed to figure a way to get the fucking Dow down to 40 grand by the end of Friday, or everybody was going to lose their ass. Gold was breaking out towards 2,500, and oil was trying to push towards 86, and blah, 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 blah. In the world that I live in, that answer is 100% yes. We live in this world where, there are enough tells out there that there's something really sinister going on here. There's something not operating at the level, it's not, everything's operating at only 3 or 4 different levels. And we just have to, we have to be willing to look at the data that way. I'm not quite sure what my original point was when I go into the CrowdStrike thing, but it was like,
we're talking about
I don't know that that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
We were talking about Powell and the Fed and rate cuts, and then you opened up with Counter-Strike.
Right. So would they have wanted to issue that thing as a warning to let everybody know that they can take the markets down at a moment's notice? If that was a deliberate thing. CrowdStrike, kind of important. Like, this is an organization that's really, really shady. So I don't know. Like, and I'm at the point now where, again, but by the same token, I can easily make an argument that because CrowdStrike is such an inflammatory thing, that you seed some chum into the freaking water to let everybody go chase the CrowdStrike rabbit hole when it was something else entirely that was going on. Like, I don't even know what these people anymore. Like, we're in such an information war at this point. We don't know what's up. We don't know what's down. We don't know who to trust, and we don't know who to distrust. Assume everybody's lying to is great until you're like, okay, but at some point I got to trust somebody. I got to have some more. I had to have some anchor to reality, or I'm just making inferential guesses, and then everybody's schizoposting. And I'm not saying I don't schizopost. Like, fuck, that's half of what I do. Like, let's make some connections and let's draw some synthetic conclusions based on what we think we know, and then throw a hypothesis out there and see if you're right. Don't walk out there and go, it's fact, because I won't even wink, nudge, and say it's fact. Like, I see other people do that, and I'm like, don't do that. Just go out there humbly and say, look, I've seen these things, and then I got this. but I got these data over here, which says something different. So you have to, and just keep narrowing, it's like you brought up earlier with Bukele and Trump. That to me is a discordant piece of information. I don't know what to do with it. So now I'm going to start backing off on some of my other assumptions, or I'm going to have to start looking into whatever's going on with Bukele, or, yada, 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 or who's standing around Trump now whispering in his ear about El Salvador and what's the importance of El Salvador, blah, 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 blah. So if someone has a hard on to undermine Bukele, and Trump has to make a deal, and Trump has to throw Bukele under the bus in order to get something else done that he wants, he's going to do so. And it doesn't mean anything more than that. It was a point I was trying to make to Caitlin Long the other day when she was on my podcast and we were talking about Custodia Bank. And I'm like, look, Caitlin, I'm not, she went through the whole story about, the Fed, and I wasn't even like going to argue with her. It was clearly, this is something important to her. She's dedicated her life to it, and it sucks. And, and she's got a lot bound up in it. And I'm like, yeah. And all that could be absolutely true. And at the same time, Powell may have had to cut a deal. We know that there are plenty of Wall Street banks that want in on crypto and don't want any competition in the space. Okay, Powell's saying we're going to do this, and we're taking away this avenue of foreign business for you. We're taking away that vertical. We're taking away that revenue source. You can have this one instead. Oh, but there's this nuisance called Custodia Bank in the way. We can't have that as well. All right, well, we'll just get rid of Custodia Bank. It's not a hard argument to make. I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not like trying to justify anybody's actions here. I think it sucks, but it's just is what it is, and I can make that. I can easily make that argument, even if I don't necessarily believe it. But it's something to consider. And then you can take that model and you're going to apply it to all sorts of things that look weird, that look on the surface like they're discordant with who the person is or isn't. But we're going to be in that world where, hey, look, man, I think it's the way I'm putting it in the next issue of the newsletter when it comes out is like, look, shit sandwiches are on the menu. That's all that's on the menu, even for the FOMC chair. And if you're not comfortable with, operating in that space and commenting in that space, well, then don't comment, because you're not prepared to do the hard work and to give people good information, because that's ultimately why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. We're here to give people good information and make at least trustworthy information you possibly can, right? So that's what you do. But and if you're not willing to do that, then I'm not saying, I don't want, if you're not willing to do it, you're making the choice to take yourself out of the game. I want you in the game, right? I'm not being a gatekeeper here. I'm saying, fine, I want as many voices in this thing doing the hard work as much as possible, but you got to be, willing to play the whole game, not just the parts of the game you like. This isn't, sadly, this isn't some spreadsheet Euro board game where you can just play this. I'm just going to play this mini game over here, and you're going to play that mini game, and I'm going to try and score more points in there. It doesn't work that way. This is real world. This is the real world. We got to engage the whole thing, body, mind, and soul. So there it is. Okay.
It's a great point. Speaking of Jerome Powell, before we get to Jerome Powell, I wanted to quickly say, I'm not saying this because you're here either, but the Gold Goats and Guns newsletter is my anchor to reality, and your podcast as well. So just speaking of anchors to reality, I love how you put the pieces on the puzzle board, so to say. So I think that's great, because I think the world's going to get even more noisier, and those who can deliver and synthesize the signal in a coherent, mental operating model of how the world works, people want to, listen to those kinds of people. So that's worth noting. You said anchors to reality, but you also mentioned Powell. I'm really interested to see what happens with Powell and a potential Trump presidency. Again, who knows what's going to happen? But, Trump has historically been a low interest rates guy. Do you have any idea what that could look like if Trump were to win and Powell stays on as Fed chair?
I think it's fine. I think Trump's finally gotten the talk that of what the plan is about SOFR, LIBOR, and all this. I think he's finally. I think early on in the process, I don't know that he was actually privy to what the plan was, because there's no guarantee that he was actually going to be around. right? I mean, note that after he survives this assassination attempt, it comes out that Jamie Dimon is being considered for Treasury Secretary. Right? So, like my point ultimately is, I don't think Trump really ever had much of a problem with Powell. I think what he was doing earlier in the year when he came out, like, oh, this fucking bitch. This is Trump in campaign mode. Remember, Trump is in candidate mode is different than Trump, in office mode. Different guy. So it would be to his advantage strategically to come out against the Fed chair when everybody is screaming for the Fed to cut interest rates 7 times, for him to come out and say, yo, Powell, don't cut rates or you won't have a job. We're not going to sit here and have this like, rational or, simple, I, Donald Trump does not need to allay the fans of gold, ghosts, and guns that he's on board with the thesis. Like, we're a really small part of the freaking electorate. Like, we don't fucking matter. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. But all of my people, like everybody, like lost their freaking minds. I'm like, guys, calm the fuck down. Seriously, like Trump gives a shit. He's out there just trying to make sure that Powell doesn't cut rates to let Biden off the hook. It's not that big a deal. It's called strategy. It's called talking your book, dude. I've done it. I I'm awful. I've done it at the gaming table so many times. My friends don't want to play games like that with me anymore at all because I'm worse than Trump. We don't play games like that anymore because Tom's like, no, dude, you're too much of an asshole. I can never tell when you're telling me the truth and when you're telling me a lie. I'm like, I'm usually telling you the truth. The problem is that when I'm telling you the truth, I'm also telling my truth, and my truth is more powerful than yours. But I put you in a bad position that you have to do what I think you should do. That's the game. And when you understand that that's the game, like when you're thinking that far ahead, like how do I manipulate this person into the position? Yeah, that's what you do. And it's a skill, and it's a skill I honed for many, many years. It's not like I was good at it when I was in my 20s, but by the time I walked out of my 30s, I'm like, oh no, I'm really good at this. And I can't play certain games with. I don't play those games with my wife anymore because then we don't speak to each other for a week, and that's bad. I like my wife, so I like my wife a lot. So it's detente, but I'm not ever going to not do that when I'm in that mode. And you can't expect Trump to be that way when he's running for president. So that's a mirror to your own anxiety, not really. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm not, I'm above my own anxiety, because that would be a lie. Period. Like, we all have our own anxieties that we have to like manage on a day-to-day basis. And we're all living through times where it's going to be difficult to get it right. And I'm going to go on. There's going to be times when I do a show like this and I'm like, I'm completely off base. It happens. I have good days and I have bad days. We all do. And I've made it, I've tried to make it clear that, on Tuesday, I'm like, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine. And by Thursday, I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, we're all going to die. And it's the nature of the world. And it's not that I'm bipolar, though I probably am to a greater or lesser extent. It's because the world is bipolar, and, we can only self-medicate so much, in my case, with coffee and cigars. So
I'm a coffee fan with you there, Tom. I smash a few coffees, don't you worry. Now,
I don't abuse it the same way that I did when I was your age, though, Luke. Now it's mostly decaf during the day. It's like, so this is me on decaf. I have my pot of regular in the morning, and then it's unleaded for the rest of the day.
I like that, unleaded. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the top of the hour. I want to maybe finish with a couple of little rapid fire questions.
Sure.
What's piquing your attention most for the rest of the year? We've got the elections in November. We've got Powell coming out and speaking next month. You also mentioned something really interesting in a roundtable you did last week with some other European guys. When you're talking about Europe and LIBOR, there's a switch happening there in September.
Okay, so just a really quick, LIBOR will stop being quoted on September 30th. Now, for the most part, it's already dead, in the same way that it was, it was sunsetted here in America for months, 6 months or a year before SOFR finally took over and we had the quote unquote SOFR cliff. But yeah, there's going to be the end of LIBOR. The big thing about the end of LIBOR is that no longer is there any real need after that for money to flow through London banks if they don't need to. That, I think that's probably the biggest issue. And it's probably the thing that everybody's scared of the most, because if they can't, if Britain can't figure out a way to continue to keep itself relevant in the financial space, and that would be in the insurance and reinsurance space, as well as, you know, all the money that flows in through City of London, which is where most of British GDP is at this point, where Britain's relevance comes from. And the United States is fully independent politically and economically, or monetarily. They don't need to exist anymore. And I think that that's the metaphorically speaking, that's the thing that LIBOR really, the end of LIBOR really represents. And they can quote versus SOFR, but at the end of the day, we're in charge of the rate. They aren't. They don't have any ability to move. They don't have any ability to influence the market, to push or pull the market in whatever direction they want. That, and I think that's important. I think it's a subtle point, but it's there, and something we have to look forward to. And it may be the source of how the timing around a potential October surprise.
Surprises happen in October. From memory, that's the month that you typically see the biggest crashes. I think 1929.
First week of October. Beginning of first week of Q4, right before an election.
That's a serious
Everybody gets finished. Well, everybody gets finished with their end of the year books, their end of the quarter book squaring. They all book their profits and dress their balance sheets, do their thing, and then they start setting their tax policy for their investments for the year, whether they have to start doing tax loss selling or profit taking, whatever they're going to do. They start the process of what's their Q4 strategy going to be. And it's usually centered around taxes, the upcoming elections, blah 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 blah. And so it makes sense. And then, of course, with all that anxiety built into the markets, if you're someone of the bent to want to put your thumb on the scale of the market to do a thing, boom, that's when things usually start to fall apart.
Pay attention. It's only a few months away, October. Tom, we've mentioned my favorite newsletter that I recommend to everybody first, and that is the Gold, Goats and Guns newsletter. We've mentioned your podcast. Is there anywhere else the listeners can come and find you online if they want to reach out and join your Patreon? And do you have any final thoughts for today's chat?
Sure. The first thing, of course, well, dude, that's where the worst version of me shows up every day. You also follow my partner, Dexter White, at Dexter K. White on Twitter. I'm going to start publicizing him as well, because, well, he needs to tweet more, whether he likes it or not. And I know he probably hate me for saying that, and I don't really care. Not that I don't care, but I do, but I don't. It's good for him. Of course, the Patreon.com/Gold, Goats and Guns. We do the newsletter every month. We do twice weekly market reports where every Wednesday and Sunday I do a private chat for my patrons, which, you know, are behind the paywall, but, you know, I think they're good. You know, we do technical analysis of the markets to keep up with the events of the day, you know, fresh memes, the whole 9 yards. And then of course, any private work any private work that I publish as well. And we go from there. And that's it. I mean, it's the podcast, which is at the blog at Gold. You can get all the free stuff that we put out is on goldgoatsandguns.com. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you want. It's syndicated everywhere. I think you should, you know, sign up on Fountain, being a Bitcoin guy, like, you know, do the value for value thing. I'll give them that for free because I think it's just a good service, and we'll go from there.
There you have it. Tom, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as always.